Hi, you're watching Hindustan Times. I'm Aditi Prasad, and with me is the paper's editor-in-chief, Sukumar Ranganathan. Now, in a few days' time, the mega climate conference at Glasgow will begin. And it's not going, I mean, I will not be exaggerating if I'm saying that the future of the planet is literally at stake. And Sukumar, let me bring you in at this point. COP26, so the 26th session of the conference of the parties at the United Nations climate change platform is set to take place, I think starts from October 31st. These meetings have been taking place year after year. But can you explain to our viewers the significance of this COP26? Why is it particularly important?
It's important for a variety of reasons. Let me go in reverse chronological order. The IPCC came out with a report on the physical aspects of climate change based on scientific evidence that they've accumulated over the past several years, which clearly showed that um, we were missing some of the targets or one of the targets that we said we would aim for in the Paris Accord in 2015. Now, the important thing in that Paris Agreement was we said we would try and keep global warming to below 1.5 degrees over pre-industrial levels. Now that target, some people are still speaking about the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, but that target is gone because the IPCC report makes it very clear that that cannot be met. The other target that was set in the Paris Agreement was 2 degrees. And what the IPCC report laid out very clearly was what warming of 2 degrees would mean. Right? Now, if you take all the commitments, and we are not speaking of the current status, I'm speaking about the commitments, which are the promises that countries have made. If you take the current promises that countries have made, scientists have again tabulated all of that, and data that was released just a few days ago shows that we are looking at a minimum of 2.7 degrees increase by the end of this century, which is really bad news. Because what does it mean? It means significant rise in sea levels. It means melting at the poles. It means a change in rainfall pattern. It means not being able to grow what you were growing in the region where you were growing. It means mass scale. It means mass human migration from areas where the weather just becomes too inclement to stay to areas where they think is safer. It means the drowning of many coastal cities, including many in India, which has a huge which has a coast. So this is frightening. So this conference is basically aimed at getting some kind of commitment on what countries will do to try and make sure that we don't go down the 2.7 degrees route, that we try and keep it below 2 degrees.
But there is no guarantee of an agreement, really. Do you think it will make a difference in the way these negotiations are carried out this time, this latest IPCC report?
I hope it does, right? I mean, and what are the sticking points? So, what are the things that we expect from this, and what are the sticking points? Um, there are two or three issues that are really sticking points. The first one, like I mentioned, was climate financing,
Right.
because one of the commitments that the developed countries made was that, and this was a commitment that was made in 2009, was that by 2020, uh, developed countries would start offering 100 billion as climate funding to help developing countries cope with the impact of climate change. Now, this financing, I mean, this is not just some generosity on their part. This fits into a concept called climate justice,
Right.
it's because developed countries are responsible for a dominant part of carbon which is there in the atmosphere right now. These are legacy issues. They have benefited from the fruits of using fossil fuel and develop their economies and become rich, for want of a better description.
Right.
And now they are trying to push developing countries like India to take steep cuts, which could actually come in the way of their economic development. So, this climate financing is a very, very important aspect. Um, it turns out, according to a study conducted by the COP26 organizers, uh, that the developed countries will miss the 2020 deadline, and that only by 2023 will they meet the target of 100 billion a year in aid. And even 100 billion is not a whole lot of money when you're talking about these issues. The second sticking point is net zero, right? A lot of developed countries have said everyone should commit to net zero by a certain deadline, and the deadline that is being spoken of is 2050. That is not going to happen, and I think it's very unfair to expect that to happen, because various countries are at various points in the trajectory of their economic development. The third issue, which is a subsidiary issue but it's a very important issue for us especially, is coal. What do you do with coal?
Yeah.
What kind of transformation can you effect when it comes to coal? What kind of technologies can you effect when it comes to coal? And that is another thing that I think they should discuss. One of the things that India should obviously speak about is what it is doing with renewables, because we are well on our way to meeting our target in terms of renewables. I think by 2030 we will have 450 gigawatts of renewable capacity which is installed, which will be 60% of the overall energy being, or the energy source being there at that point in time. So by 2030, that 450 gigawatts will account for 60% of the overall power generation capacity in this country. That's going to be entirely renewables. We are already on track to meet our emissions intensity of GDP target.
What do you think India's official stance is going to be at this summit?
What we've been very clear about is that we are not going to be pushed into taking a net zero by 2050 or a net zero commitment by when we are not ready for it. But otherwise, if you look at India's track record in this area, and also our or our performance in terms of meeting our commitments, I think we've met most of our commitments. In terms of emissions intensity of GDP, we've met our commitments. In terms of renewables, as an overall proportion of power generation, I think we've met our commitments. We'll probably exceed our commitments. Um,
Right.
I think India will continue to stress on the aspect of climate justice, which is entirely understandable.